Welcome to the Awakening Podcast. You can find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and Rumble. I've got 4 other podcasts, as well as being a podcasting coach, meditation, speaking, learn Polish, and the crypto podcast. And you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today is actually also a teacher and has her own business, Skillabration, and she's in Chicago. Please welcome Nikki Lubing. Did I do your surname justice?
That is correct. You said it correctly. Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. So I suppose you might let people know a little bit more about Nikki.
Absolutely. So I'm the owner of Skillabration. We're an online foreign language school, and we take students' foreign language skills from 0 to fuego. And if you don't know what fuego is fire. And we have a Mandarin teacher, Spanish teachers, and we're currently adding on a French teacher. So we'll have French classes soon as well. And all of our classes are for primarily homeschool students. And I got started in 2016 with my solopreneur journey. I was formerly a public school teacher from 2005 to 2016, and I taught middle school ESL in Spanish. ESL is English as a second language. Sometimes people aren't sure what it is.
I had seen something. I was like, "What is ESL?" I thought it was another language. To be honest with you.
English as a second language, and Spanish in a bilingual environment. I also taught high school Spanish. And so my bachelor's is in Spanish. And then along with that, I got a certificate in teaching English as a second language later on. So lots of experience with teaching language. And then I really wanted more freedom and creativity in my work and wanted to serve my students better. And I felt that I could do that better outside the school system. So it's all started with teaching English as a second language to the Chinese from 2016 to about 2021. And then things shifted in that sphere. So then I switched back to Spanish. And then I found out I could do an organization at the platform where I host my classes. So I could bring on other teachers. And so I founded my organization, Skillabration, this year. And Skillabration is because learning a language is a skill and a celebration. And eventually I want to add on more skills, such as entrepreneurship, teaching kids about that, teaching kids about emotional intelligence, financial literacy, focusing in those areas as well, because just having all those different skills myself has been a huge blessing in my life, allowing me to do so many opportunities. So that's what Skillabration is all about.
Yeah, brilliant. So I just like when you were in the public teaching.
Yes.
I mean, I presume your hands are kind of tied with when you want to try to be creative and everything. So, what things would you have seen that, because just from different shows that I've done, we've exposed kind of the education system, not just on languages, but on the whole education system. And I got kicked off YouTube for the Awakening podcast, but then I have my own personal channel as well, and I was only putting up safe ones. And it was actually a person exposing the education system. And I got another strike for that on my personal channel. And I was like, they don't like this at all, that we're exposing how bad the education system. But just curious, that fact that you've had one foot in the door there, that what kind of things is going on?
In my experience, it was a lot of the logistics at the time didn't make sense. In my opinion, they were a disservice to the students. So an example is when I was teaching middle school, they would make decisions like switching the teachers around in the middle of the year, let's say. So I'm working with a group of 7th grade ESL students, they're English language learners. And in that specific role, especially in that specific role, you want to really know your students really, really well, because everybody has a different language level, right? They're all on a different path. So if you're switching a teacher in the middle of the year, that's not helping your students
That
at
doesn't
all.
make sense at
It
all.
makes no sense. So that's one thing. Another thing was, for example, taking our room away. We had a little room and it was a pretty small room already. And it's a smaller population that we worked with. but giving that room to another group of students who already had a room. So, and then just kind of like, oh, you can go in here, you can go in there, and moving us all around the school. So those logistics just didn't really, again, they weren't serving the students. And, I would speak up, I would advocate for the students, and 9 times out of 10, it would fall on deaf ears. There were some things after a year of pushing for something, then they might add it on, but uh, yeah, it was situations like that. So
And did you
just,
find that people, because I've just seen in all industries, like, that's wrong, but
mhm.
the majority of people, instead of having your back and 10 teachers or 20 teachers going, hey, this should stop, they just remain quiet. And then you look like you're out on your own with the hatchet trying to beat them down. And it's simple to kind of take down one person. Whereas if everybody stood up together, but because they're saying, oh, I have a mortgage, I have this, it was that similar in your situation?
Um, I would say for the most part, teachers are actually pretty vocal. They don't like to be messed with, especially because they have a union here in the states. Most of the teachers have a teachers union, which is not always, I don't know that I wasn't a part of the union, so it's very political. So that wasn't my thing, but yeah, I would say most teachers are pretty vocal because of that. So in this case with the ELL population, the English language learners, most of us would band together. Yeah, I would say we were all pretty vocal about it, and it still fell on deaf ears. So that's another reason why it's like, okay, this isn't going to change. The grass is not greener. I didn't see the public school system getting any better, and where it is today, I had no idea where it would end up where we are today. Um, so I'm really grateful that I left when I did, especially going through the pandemic and everything. Like, I was really already set up with my online business, so I'm super grateful to have left when I did.
Yeah, it was good
Yeah,
timing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And what about like the craziness that's going on with the kind of books that they're bringing in and kind of the grooming the children? I mean, to see that must be kind of disheartening as well. It shouldn't be done. I mean, it's like eh, when you say that, yeah.
Yeah, again, I believe in teaching children how to think for themselves, never teaching anybody what to think. So that's another reason why I do what I do, because I, you know, I was raised to think for myself. I was raised to question authority, and I believe that's how we need to make children think for themselves. That's
Yeah,
it,
no,
period.
exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
like, before we delve into the kind of different teaching styles and different things like
Yeah.
that, because I know you kind of with the homeschooling as well, because I read somewhere that it's something like 2 million in America now are homeschooling, and I know there's a lot of people around the world doing the same. I mean, my youngest child, he's actually doing, they're copying the Finnish system, so they're very creative. So he's happy out, everybody in there's happy, very nice people. So I know it's not similar to a typical school, but
Hmm.
like what can you tell us about the kind of homeschooling and what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, homeschooling has been skyrocketing. The percentages have really increased. And maybe just with the pandemic, like, things have been exposed, or they're just deciding like, oh, we can actually do this because they dipped their toe in at that time. And so it really pushed people to say, yeah, I'm going to do this. Um, and that's where, I'm really grateful again that I have the platform that I do, and that I've been able to start this online business already and now see it grow. I just went to a homeschool convention in April. Like, it's May, right? Yeah. So I went in April. When you're in business, you're like, I'm so busy." I'm like, wait, when was that? It was literally a month ago. But yeah, so I went to the great homeschool convention. It was in Cincinnati, Ohio. They go all around the US. I think maybe they even did one in Canada. Um, and they have all kinds of speakers, and there were thousands of families going through like foot traffic. I think probably they said they were expecting over 3,000 families. So I don't know if they met those numbers, but it's skyrocketed. So
And
yeah.
like, because some parents think that you have to be teaching your child for 8 hours, but the reality is it's maybe two a day, two.
Yeah. So I actually asked a couple of my students yesterday who I'm tutoring. They're two different kids from two different families, but they're taking the class together as a tutoring session. And I asked them, I said, "Oh, how long do you guys study typically?" And like you said, they said about 2 to 3 hours a day. And I've heard that a lot from homeschool families. So it's and they everybody does it different. There's unschooling, there's world schooling, there's
What? I've never
um
heard of that. What's unschooling?
um like opposite of schooling.
Just do your own thing, you be
Yeah.
grand kind of thing or something. Not sure if I'd be a
I
fan of
don't
that
think
one.
I don't think there's like a specific definition to that because people make it their own. It's doing the opposite of the system in my I think that's what it is, but you know, um, choosing how do you want to teach your kids, and maybe they go outside and learn for the day, rather than looking at a textbook. So it's really making it your own. World schooling is you travel and you learn as you travel. And then there's classical. A lot of homeschool families take the classical education route, which is learning Latin and rhetoric, and um, it's a classical liberal education. Excuse me, education. So yeah.
I didn't do Latin, but I know that my mother learned Latin, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious why people are learning Latin even now. I mean, is there a reason behind it?
Someone just asked me this too. They're like, "Isn't that language dead?" Well, actually, it's alive and within other languages. So a lot of languages have Latin roots. Spanish, English, have Latin roots. So if we understand those Latin roots in our own language, that can really help you understand how to communicate better, and just understand the language better as a whole. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And like, I suppose because there's obviously a lot of parents that would be listening to this, and their children. So like the advantages of learning a language, because I know
Mhm.
some countries don't learn it; they just have English and that's it. And it's like, but I think I mean, my son is Polish and he's fluent in English, and he was even learning Spanish as well, which I think is fantastic. And it's when you start traveling you realize the benefit of it, but there's probably obviously other benefits as well in the brain and everything with doing a language.
Exactly. Yes. So bilingual brains are buff. They can, when you have a bilingual brain, you can focus more. So these are what studies have showed. You can focus more, problem solve better, multitask better. Your brain is more flexible. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that means, but sounds pretty cool to me. um, when your brain is more flexible, the way I think of it, so when I do puzzles with my family, they notice that I do the puzzles really, really well and maybe a little bit faster than they do. So maybe it's flexible in that way. Like I can see the pieces in a different way because I understand, like with piecing a language together. I learned Spanish as a second language, so my brain had to work really hard to build that language and the fluency eventually. Um, and aside from the brain benefits, there's also a benefit too with Alzheimer's. They've found out that when you're bilingual or multilingual, you can put off dementia and Alzheimer's longer. And then I think there was like a study on nuns that were bilingual with the Alzheimer's thing. Like their brain had some kind of sign of Alzheimer's, but they weren't showing that they had Alzheimer's. Don't quote me on that, but look up the study. So it's something I read a long time ago, but I really thought it was fascinating. And then friendships, right? So building friendships around the world. Um, I've had pen pals all over the world, maybe writing in English, but just opening up in terms of culture. When I went to Mexico as a young kid, I went as young as 7, and just that's what inspired me to learn the language. Hearing the language, I was like, I want to be a part of that conversation. And from there, I just got pen pals all over the world. I had a pen pal in China. I had a pen pal in Brazil, pen pals in the US. So it opens up your world when you travel, and it really is exciting to have friendships all over the world, and then eventually becoming fluent in Spanish, having friends in Spain and again in Mexico, and being able to say, hey, if I need to call somebody and I'm over in Europe or whatever, I can call somebody up and say, hey, let's hang out. It's just such a benefit to have that, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So,
And with the teachers then, because I think I 12 or 13, I started learning French. And when I say learning, I wasn't really learning. It was kind of, the teacher was just, we weren't a bit interested. And I think we had like 3 classes a week of 40 minutes for 3 years. I got a D, barely passed it for the state exam. And it was later when I was going to France and meeting French people, I was like, I wish I can say parlez-vous français, je m'appelle Ryan. That's about it. And I was like, for 3 years, it's kind of sad. And then Irish, like we do Irish, we start school at 4. So we're doing Irish from 4 years of age. And I
mhm.
wasn't too bad around 12 because I had a very good teacher. But then when I went into the secondary school, they were useless, just like terrible. Like we had one guy, he was an alcoholic and he just didn't care. And it was like
Wow.
my mom made sure we went to one of the best schools in the city, but yet you're dealing with this kind of thing. At my Irish level went so like I can't remember. I have very few words in Irish for doing it from 4 to 17. With Polish then when I moved to Poland. So I was trying everything. I went to the university and they just spoke in Polish, and I was lost. I was like, "What's going on here? I don't know any Polish." It's like so that wasn't the way of learning. Then I got a private teacher, but I was doing it in the evening after work because I was an entrepreneur. I was doing my own business, doing real estate and stuff like that, and I was exhausted. And I used to fall asleep during and it was like not online. It was like she was come to the apartment. So she used to get me to juggle tennis balls to keep me kind of occupied. And I definitely improved. Then I got lessons. But I used to keep saying to them, I just want to have a conversation. And they used to be pushing grammar and I tried everything. I was trying Rosetta Stone. I was trying Pimsleur. I was trying to, in the end, I set up the podcast to kind of help myself because I was looking at podcasts and I was like, they were either scripted or they were only in Polish. So I done it in a way and it's very successful. But I found that's a good way for me to learn. But there's so many teachers out there, they just have a system and they're not really connecting with the learning capabilities of the individual because we're all different.
Yeah. The word connection is everything. That's one of the words that I used in my marketing, in my class descriptions. I talk about connecting, not just the way you teach the lesson, but connecting with the people you're teaching. So connecting with the students and getting to know them, and really, I always say I cater my lessons to the students, especially for one-on-one tutoring, but even with group classes, when you get to know your students, you can cater the lesson to them in terms of the questions that you ask. So if I mean, it's simple, but if you know somebody who likes sports, you bring that into the lesson. It doesn't have to be that difficult. But my favorite Spanish teacher, she did a lot of games with us. That's how she made it interesting and fun, or even with storytelling too. So telling students about the trips that I've taken and how it impacted me, and little interesting facts about culture as you're teaching the lesson. So you're opening up their eyes to these possibilities as you're teaching. And then when it comes to those difficult parts of learning grammar, then it's not so bad because there's something exciting on the end. You're like, okay, this might be difficult right now, but oh, Miss Nikki told me about this thing and I still want to learn. So you're inspiring students as you teach them. That's how I do it. And that's what when I interview other teachers and they come on my team, um, that's what I look for in my teachers. Are they engaging? Are they fun? Are they passionate about the language? When you have that passion, it just reflects, right? You're emulating that out to the classroom. So,
No,
yeah.
exactly. And like, I mean, my son, obviously, he was born in Poland, and
Okay.
so I was like, we separated at a very early age when he was 1. So I was like,
Okay.
I've equal custody, and I started speaking in Polish first, but he started making my grammar errors, and people said, "No, you better speak to him in English." So I decided, okay, I mean, I was never trained as a teacher, but he's fluent now. But he was telling me yesterday that he's in, like, there's 3 different groups, that he got 100% with all classes, even 2 classes ahead of him. And all I was doing was, one, making sure that I was doing stuff that was of interest to him. If he wanted to watch, say, The Simpsons, no, it has to be English. And now he prefers it because there's like a lecture in Polish, which is kind of, so he can watch. And there was one stage then where there was text on the television and he didn't know it. And I was like, oh, I haven't been teaching him how to read. He can speak perfect. So then I bought him 100 books. We had a competition to read 100 books. And I used to get him to read the book. So I'd be next to him. And just simple, just building up really simple books. But then he got to such a stage where he was good. Then I get him to write it. But just by that simple process. And I mean, I haven't been trained as a teacher, but yet I wish the people that were teaching me the languages would have just done it as simple as that. That just gets you, that you're not, like, even when I'm, say, in Poland and I was around people, the amount of people that put you down, like, they don't do it in a nice way to correct you. And then you just change back to English. And that must go on around the world. You know, people, how they correct you, not just the teacher, but in general, when you're trying to make an effort. And it's kind of, I suppose, the mindset. I'd like to kind of touch on that, because obviously you've kind of, how we get the right mindset
That's
for a language.
that's super interesting, actually. I have so many different experiences with correcting because as a teacher, probably more so than a student, but so when I was teaching the Chinese, it's super interesting because in their culture, if you're not correcting them, it's almost like, why am I here? They want you to correct them like no other. And so it's like totally opposite from our culture, right? So Western culture, or maybe it's just like an English thing, I don't know, like American, UK kind of thing. But in our culture, it's kind of like, oh, if you're correct too much, you're like, it's a little bit sensitive, right? So yeah, that's an interesting topic to me. So when I now, because I've worked with the Chinese, I worked with them for however many years, 5 years or something like that. I carried that into my Spanish a little bit, but in a different way, because I know most of the students that I teach are in the U.S. So for when I teach them, I'm correcting them still, but not as aggressively as with when I worked with the Chinese. Um, but I find that with my students now, when I do correct them, I don't get a sense that they're discouraged. So I must be doing it in a way, because I have that relationship with them. I always build the relationship. Um, I must be doing it in a way that's not intimidating. I don't really know what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Just being my friendly self, I guess, right? So, and I'll just say, oh, with pronunciation or whatever, this is how you pronounce it. Really trying to get them to that next level. So working on helping them progress, and so maybe that's why they're able to take it that way. Um, I've experienced what you have too. When I had another teacher once, when I was at an advanced level, and she was correcting me quite often, and that kind of felt like, oh, like like like,
You just want to
okay,
stop talking, like.
yeah. It was almost like, okay, then why am I taking but then at the same time, it's like, okay, but I am gonna grow. So I don't know. That's an interesting topic for sure. In Spain, though, when I was in Spain and I would speak Spanish, they would hear my accent and they would just automatically talk to me in English. And I was really disappointed. I was doing my study abroad in college, and I'm like, but I'm here to speak. I mean, like, why are you speaking to me in English? Come
It
on, is my
happens to
Spanish
me
that
all the time
bad?
here. I try, and as soon as I say something, then they just go, "Oh, it's English," and they just, And what I've learned is that a lot of them are actually practicing their
Practicing.
English because they
Yeah.
don't get the opportunity to speak in English. And
Yep, yep,
I
yep.
should have stuck to my guns and just
Yes,
kind of
yes, yes.
keep speaking in Polish, but it's like
Yep.
it's so much easier to speak in English. I just go, oh, great, I can speak in English instead of struggling to speak Polish.
Yeah. So,
And with like groups then, because I know sometimes it's a financial thing with some families, and that's totally understandable. But sometimes it's not that students kind of perform better in a kind of group thing. So what have you seen with that, with as opposed to the one-on-one when there's kind of, I don't know, 3 to 10 different people that are learning at the same time?
so wait, ask the question again. What's the question?
It's like the advantages maybe are, like not. I mean, it could be due to financial reasons, that obviously if you're in a bigger group, it's cheaper than doing a one-on-one.
Uh-huh.
But like sometimes people, they actually prefer to be in a group
Yeah.
setting. And what kind of advantages can you see when there's a group setting, when
Oh,
there's, yeah.
yeah, sure. With group setting classes, so yeah, I have group classes that are 3 to 10 students. Um, I would say it's really nice when it's 5 to 8 students. That's a good mix because it's not too big, not too small. And in those classes, I will have them converse with each other. So instead of what I've noticed as a student is in a lot of times in Spanish class or whatever foreign language class you're in, you don't get to ask questions very often. It's typically like the teacher's asking you a question, or, there's just not a big conversational piece. So I will always make sure we go around the group and each person will ask the question. And when the last person has their turn, they'll ask me. So they're not left without asking the question. So, and that's kind of fun too, to engage with the teacher in that way. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit more conversational with the group setting versus one-on-one. Whereas with one-on-one, the advantage would be it's more catered to them. You're getting that individualized attention. So there's benefits to both for sure.
Okay. So there's one thing that I saw you doing in a video, and it's something I know I could never do, and it was how to roll the R's, and you
Oh,
had a way of doing. So
R.
you might actually explain how, because I know a lot of people, especially kind of in Ireland and England, we just don't use that like as R. So
In
you might,
Polish, they do, right? They roll their
yeah.
R a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so some people say my name, they go, oh, I can't even say the way I love listening to the way they do it, but I can't do it with
I
rolling
have
the
a Polish student like living in Warsaw actually. So he's like, "Oh yeah, we do that in Polish." So with rolling your R, especially for English speakers, um, let's practice right now. So everyone say the word run, run.
run,
Okay. Okay. Notice where your tongue goes when you say run. Say it again.
run.
So your
Oh,
tongue is kind of lifting up towards the back of your mouth. That is not where you want it to be when you are saying the R in Spanish. So the R in Spanish is R, and your tongue is actually hitting right behind your 2 front teeth at the roof of your mouth. So if you say the phrase pot of tea, say it really fast, pot of tea, pot of tea, pot of tea, pot of tea. You want to
pot of
try?
tea, pot of tea, pot of tea, pot of tea.
Where your tongue is right there, that is where it's supposed to be when you're rolling your R. Now, if you practice that over and over and over, I'm saying like a good 5-10 minutes, then your tongue is going to naturally be in that position to roll your R. You could also practice with butter, 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 saying the word butter as fast as you can. And then you could go butter, 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 R, which is the R. The R is the Spanish R. So butter, 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 R, butter, 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 R. And so you're getting, it's flowing. It's flowing into the position it's supposed to be in. And once you know that's where it's supposed to be, that's how you start rolling your R's.
Brilliant, brilliant. So what other kind of techniques for learning? I mean, I know sometimes people, if they like a song, that perhaps they listen to the song and then they can be doing that. And because they love the song, they can learn the words. But I just kind of what different things you would actually recommend? Because I mean, obviously if they're doing Spanish and they're interested in working with you, it's great. But there's so many different languages that just what you would recommend people to improve on learning a language?
I think that's a great question, and I highly recommend translating lyrics. So when I was a kid, that was right when the internet was emerging in the 90s, in the 2000s, early 2000s. We didn't really have all the translation tools that, we do now. And I used a dictionary. I used the Spanish to English, English to Spanish dictionary, and that thing got so used. I mean, literally it's like falling apart because it was so used. And I still have it today. But I recommend actually doing that. I recommend getting that dictionary, Spanish to
That's
English,
probably a
English to Spanish.
psychological way because you'll remember it better. Because when I do stuff now, I can just get a camera and I just photocopy a letter from, say, the city, because the way they write anyway, when I ask people in Polish, what does it mean? They're like, I don't know, but like it's so much easier. So I'm not really learning. I just go and I'm pressing listen. I'm
Bingo.
like, I'm not even reading it. I'm just pressing listen. So with the dictionary, it makes so much sense that
You are working, and you appreciate it more too, because you're working so hard to look up every word that you need to look up, and you're learning while you do it. You discover new things while you're doing that about the language, about the words. You're going through it with a fine-tooth comb, noticing, okay, what similarities do we have here between the languages? What's different about the languages? So you're learning about the grammar, you're learning about the vocabulary when you do that. And when you physically write something, I don't know if people know this, but when you physically write it versus typing, or like you said, taking that picture, you are using that energy from your hand, that energy going up into your spine and then up into your head. So it's going up into your brain when you physically are writing something to help you remember it. So there's science behind that.
yeah, no, I
Even
mean,
with
I
writing,
tell people that all the time for
yes,
anything that I do
yes,
lists the whole time.
goals.
Whereas you have nothing there, that doesn't
No,
register.
no,
Yeah,
no. So when you're writing, like even with handwriting your goals, again, it's pushing you into action because you hand wrote it. So handwriting things is super beneficial, but I used to do that all the time with translating songs and then listening over and over to a certain lyric. Maybe it's going really fast, and then I would repeat it over and over and over again. So putting it on replay when you're memorizing the song. Music is super helpful because number one, we like music. Number two, when you memorize, it's a lot easier to memorize, right? When you hear the song, tune of a song, we learned music, we learned nursery rhymes. When we learned the alphabet, we learn a song. So highly recommend music.
I, I'm not sure does it kind of work with Spanish and other languages, but in English, I know phonetics was the best way, and they kind of took that out of the system. It was kind of look and learn kind
Crazy.
of thing. And I'm just curious with kind of with does that work in Spanish as well? Is that kind of in every language?
Oh yeah, with Spanish, there's a certain way to teach phonics too. You learn, and I have this on my YouTube channel too with a phonics lesson. But you learn the vowel sounds. So in English, we have A, E, I, O, U. In Spanish, it's A, E, I, O, U. And then you blend those with the letters. So if we have the B is ba, be, bi, bo, bu. The C, ka, se, si, ko, ku. Da, de, di, do, do. So you start blending letter by letter, and then you start mixing it into words. So maybe you'll learn, the next thing you would learn is like mama. That's how you say mom. So you're actually creating a word with it. Yeah, phonics is a thing in Spanish, and Spanish is a phonetic language, so it's a much easier to read in Spanish versus English. So
Right. And like, what's your thoughts then on kind of like the television and stuff like that? Do you think they should be, and like, especially now with Netflix, I see that you can not only have it in the language, but you can have the text. Is there kind of, are you doing yourself a disservice just having it only, just say I was learning Spanish and I haven't a clue, or should I have it that I'm looking at the words first with the English? Is there kind of system that you would recommend when somebody is looking at, say, a Netflix series?
yeah, great question. I think there's a mix of it depends on your personality. what are you comfortable with, what's going to make you run scared. So if you're listening to a movie completely in the target language and you're like super overwhelmed by that, don't do it, you know? But if you like the challenge, then yeah, go for it. In terms of the subtitles, here's what I would recommend for beginners. Listen to a movie in English. There's a lot of Disney movies in English, and then you could find them in Spanish. So if there's a movie that you like and you know whether it's dubbed in Spanish or translated into the language, but obviously you want the words to be in Spanish. So the good thing about that is you already know the context of the movie in your native language. And then when you go and watch it in Spanish, what you can do is instead of trying to listen to every single word and understand every single word, you could focus in on maybe a couple verbs or something like that, or a couple vocabulary words, so that you're not overwhelming yourself. You know the context and you're learning at the same time in little bit by bit. And you could keep rewatching that movie too. And then you pick up on phrases. You're like, oh, I know they said this. And then you're picking up on something new each time. I would recommend the subtitles in Spanish, so that way you can catch the phrases, and you know exactly how it's spelled and everything like that. Because sometimes your ear will hear things in a certain way that's not accurate. So when you see it in the language, you know how it's spelled and exactly what they're saying. And you know, you could listen one time through with English subtitles. There's so many different ways you could go about it. But yeah, it's a personality thing, and then what you can handle. If you can handle it, if you like it, then I would say definitely go for it.
Yeah.
So,
And that's finally because what I found as well, whether I was in a meeting here or just in a circle of friends and it was all in Polish, and I would really try to engage and everything, and it's like suck the energy out of me, you know. There's like, is there ways to stop that happening that you just get so exhausted? And it's like, and it's not that I want to be exhausted, but I know it happens to other people as well. Is there a way to kind of prevent that from happening?
being like getting exhausted from the language, right? That's what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just a matter of where you're at in your fluency. So if you're beginner or intermediate, you're definitely going to feel that way if you're surrounded. And that's another reason why I said with the movie, like you don't want to overwhelm yourself or exhaust yourself. So it's really smaller doses if you can. If you can't, you know, that's the
Just grin and
situation.
bear it like
It's yeah, exactly. But you're gonna grow. Just know, remind yourself, I'm gonna grow over time. My fluency is gonna improve over time. But when I taught first grade one time, and I'm more of the I work with older students, typically middle school or high school. And so when I taught first grade, not only was it a lot with the age group is pretty exhausting, 6 years old, but also I was speaking Spanish all day. And that was the first time, you know, obviously I was fluent at that time, but that was probably the first time that I was speaking Spanish all day, every day. Because even in Spain, when I lived in Spain, during college, I had my roommates where we would go home and speak English. We made a pact like every time we're out of the house, we're speaking Spanish. When we're at home, we'll allow ourselves to speak English. So this was the most I spoke all day. I was exhausted. So I think it's par for the course.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, no, listen, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Nikki. So you might just mention the different languages that you're doing, and are you planning on kind of expanding them to?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you want to bring kind of entrepreneurship, which I think is fantastic as well, because especially if they're kind of working with you and they connect with you, you know, there's a kind of trust and it just kind of leads from there. But you might just
Yeah.
the different ones that you're offering and what websites and stuff they can get you.
Sure. So you can find us at skillabration.com. Currently, we host our classes on a platform called OutSchool, but I am working to add the ability to register for classes directly with us on our website too. All of our classes are on Zoom, and we have classes right now for ages 8 through 18, but I do have a teacher on board who likes working with the 5-year-old to the 7-year-old age range. So we'll be adding that soon for Spanish. My Mandarin teacher, she has classes for 8th through middle school. And then the French teacher I'm working with will probably do middle school and high school classes. So it's going to be a long process where, we're growing our team gradually, but the goal is K to 12 language school and different languages. And then, like I said, eventually adding those other skills, because it's a celebration to have a skill in life, and we should all keep skill building. So
Absolutely. So it's skillabration.com is the website.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Skill A, and then like the word celebration, bration. Skill A, bration.
Okay, perfect. Listen, thanks very much. I'll make sure I'll put the link both in the audio and the video.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So that's all for the Awakening Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and Rumble, and you'll find my further podcasts along with my coaching on bio.link/podcaster. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends. Really helps. Until next week, take care.